We often talk about education choice here on the show, but we never really talk about how you get there. I'm excited today to be joined by someone who offers a solution to that with a website called EdOpt.org. You're listening to
The New England Take.
It's the New England Take on WKXL, 8:30 a.m. on Saturdays. Granite Grok reshares the show on Saturday evenings, so be sure to check out those two outlets, nhtalkradio.com and granitegrok.com. And as always, be sure to subscribe if you are checking us out on YouTube. We do have a Substack, newenglandtake.com will get you right over there. So excited today to be joined by Jody Underwood, Ph.D., fascinating background. I've did a little LinkedIn look at your background, which is super interesting. But welcome to the show. I'm excited to talk about your organization, EdOpt.org.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so it's EDOPT.org if anyone wants to check out what's going on. But where did this organization get started? Like we always talk about, like, everyone should have options. They should be able to go to charter schools, private schools, homeschool, micro schools, all sorts of things been brought up, and especially over the last couple of years around in the state house side of things. But we don't necessarily always talk about how you find these solutions. So I'm interested to know what brought this about.
Right, sure. First of all, am I actually showing on the screen here? Because I
Yes.
see you. Okay, just checking. So what brought it about? I don't know, a year ago, lots of conversation. I mean, a lot of us in my region and all over the state, really, in my circle of friends, are frustrated with the government schools, with the district schools that that people default to going to. And, we start reading things that, like, last year, 72% of families were looking at alternatives, but not many took them. And, I think one of those reasons is that they don't really know what their options are, right? So, for example, a lot of people think we have two options. We can send kids to private schools, which are too expensive for me, or we can homeschool them. And that means I have to teach them everything, and I'm not qualified to do that. And both are actually misconceptions. There's so at any rate, to answer your question more directly, we started EdOpt to fill that gap, right? To help families understand what their full options are. Private schools in our region anyway are except for the prep schools, are less than the public schools cost, and that's when you do a per student cost. Like in our region, like $10,000 a year will get you a private school, and a lot of them are rolling tuitions. So you could use something like EFAs to help you with that. Now they're universal, so anybody in New Hampshire can get them. Although we've hit the cap already, so done with that for the year. But still, it's still an option. And then homeschooling, for example, to counter that, people don't know that they have these growing, lively homeschool communities in regions all over the state that, they set up co-ops together, or they informally do things, or they get together with a group and hire a teacher to teach coding or something that, they don't know about. And so it's just become this very vibrant thing to do. So I like to explain those things to people. Like, a lot of people don't know what a micro school is, right? Or I like to call them learning centers or learning clubs, because they're not schools, or they could be schools, but they don't have to be so, rigid in what they are. So that's how it came about. A group of friends and I were sitting around, and I was like, all right, let's do something. And they said, yes, let's. And so we did.
Yeah, it's this fascinating. So this kind of goes in your background a little bit of coming to the state as part of the Free State Project, and being involved with that organization. And one of the things it's one of the a lot of people don't like the Free State Project, but it's, when you think about the fact it's a laboratory basically, where you get a lot of people with different backgrounds all in one spot that want to accomplish something different, start thinking outside of the box. So it's been really healthy for the education landscape of New Hampshire to have these different people come in with all sorts of different options. I don't care what side of the political spectrum. It's unrelated. Like, these are options for kids. My son recently transferred to a charter school. We probably would have done it sooner if we understood what exactly the option was, and that it was an option. And by the way, you don't need to spend anything out of pocket to go to one of these schools. And to have a central place where you can make it happen is fantastic.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's funny because I've known about charter schools for such a long time. I assumed everybody knew about them, and I keep hearing more and more that they don't. They don't know how they work and what they are. So we're gonna have to. I'll write a blog post one of these days soon to explain them a little bit to open that door a crack. Um, yeah.
So can you tell maybe a few specific? Are you able to dive into any specific schools or education situations that have been really successful in the state that people may not think of? Maybe going beyond charter schools, but there's a lot of other ways that people can get education.
Yeah, I mean, the way I always start is when I speak to families is trying to figure out whether they can homeschool their kids. And that just means, officially homeschool them, but they can leverage other possibilities that are out there. I just think, parents are the most interested and love their kids, and they know their kids better than anybody. And so I start there, and then I talk about co-ops and getting together with other families, as I've already suggested. And one family I spoke to, the mother, when she learned about co-ops, she was like, we're allowed to do that. Like that's what she said. And I want to address something you said before about free staters. This isn't just free staters. The homeschool communities in New Hampshire, at least, are attracting people from, as you point out, all across the political spectrum. And last year, when we were advertising for a local education options fair that we've been doing across the state, and I'll talk about those in a second, I was handing out flyers to people at a local the apple pie crafts fair that we have in Newport, New Hampshire. I live in the Upper Valley, and every single person I handed a flyer to or spoke to, first of all, they took a flyer. They didn't say no, thank you, and they just said, wow, this is a great idea. Oh, I'm glad somebody's doing this. Everybody. And this is across the spectrum, the political spectrum. So, yeah, just so people know, this is not a Free Stater thing. The thing about the Free State project, or the people who come here for it, we're all interested in doing things to make things better for people. And so this is what I think will help. And obviously, we have to get, the people who want it on the other side. If there's no takers out there, then what we're doing is for naught. But here we are, and we're getting good feedback. But so, I'd rather talk about the approach than a particular approach we're taking, because I'm not recommending a particular school. I like to start with homeschooling, but that's up to the families to decide. They need to just like they shop for anything, they need to shop for what is going to suit their kids. So we take a three-pronged approach. So the first is we started a website, and I'm very proud of the website. We actually refreshed it a couple of months ago, and we have one of these maps that show you all the providers in New Hampshire, and you can zoom in and out, and you can filter on the different kinds of things, whether it's public schools, charter schools, private schools, tutoring, homeschooling, micro schools, all the things. And you can see what's in your region. You can see what's there. Now, if you still have the misconceptions, you might want to talk to us to say, hey, tell me more about these other things, these other approaches. But the website is where it starts. We have these face-to-face expos, fairs, we're now calling them, where we invite the education providers from the region, including homeschool communities and families and private schools, religious schools, micro schools, whatever we have. And we use our website to actually start that process. And we get local people to organize them because they know their regions better than we do, and they'll know of providers that aren't on our website. And then, of course, we can get that added, and they all want to be added to our website because people are going there to search. Anyway, so, we get between, I don't know, 10 and 15 providers in a room, and we advertise and get people to come to talk to people one-on-one to see what their approach is, to see what works, and so on. And we've done a dozen of those over the last year, and we've been around for just a little over a year. Our goal is to have another 5 this year, and we're just starting to plan the fall ones, so stay tuned for that. And with that, I'll also throw out, please subscribe to us if you want to see when these fairs are going to be and where. And if you want to run one yourself, we're open to that if you meet certain criteria, which are not hard, just to make it successful, right? We just want to make sure they succeed. And what else? So we offer consultations, as I said, and that really is our third leg that we use to help people. So, because you do want the one-on-one. We're trying to set something up on the website. We have, a few things going as we move forward so that people can do that kind of learning on their own. And we write blog posts. We send out like a weekly blog post and it's an email. So if you subscribe, you get that. And we explain things. We've explained what micro schools are. Charter schools are going to come. We're going to talk about EFAs at some point, especially now that we hit the 10,000 cap. And so there's a lot of, individual learning that can be done there. So that is our approach in general.
And something I think that's really important is with the makeup of your website is you have an education style section, which is a great way to think about it because people often only think about traditional, which you kind of mentioned before. But what exactly does it mean when you break down between traditional, non-traditional, and online for those that are maybe not initiated?
Oh, sure. And I mean, so education styles. I'm going to go to my website and see what that page is. So I think of traditional as brick and mortar, whether it's public or private, which, suits some kids and maybe not others. And then the non-traditional are down the homeschool arena, right? That's more non-traditional. But it also leads to some of the programs that we have in New Hampshire, like Learn Everywhere, where you can get credit in your high school for things you already do outside, whether it's martial arts or, some other electives, you can get credit towards graduation, which means you have to be in school that much less, especially if it's something not suited to you. But it's also so practical. If you're doing these things outside, why not be able to get credit? So that's also in the non-traditional. A non-traditional also would probably include dual enrollment, which surprising to me, most people have heard about that. Where, you take classes in a community college or at your high school and get credit in both. And there are a few different programs you can take. And
that's kind of interesting that people they only make the connection between the technical schools with this person's gonna be an electrician, gonna be a plumber, they're gonna be something like that when they graduate. That should be like the bare bones where it starts from, and people don't consider that there's so many other ways you can do outside of that.
That's right. Absolutely right. Well, of course, there are tech schools that teach those skills now, right? So, and most people, I think, are aware of them because they're usually in their region. But maybe they don't know if they're not in their region that they can use them anyway, right? I don't know. We help. We try. We try to, lay out the whole map of, what the possibilities are. But we do have explanations on our sites for each of the styles. So you don't have to talk to a person if you don't want to, and you can just go there and read and see what we have. Trying to up it a little bit and provide videos that explain them, but we'll get there. We're trying all the things. Yeah.
Yeah, online for sure is the third one that's on there, which definitely the K through 12 situation people never consider. We always hear about in the higher education, or I'm going to get a certificate so I can advance my career and things like that. Online has been around forever, but people don't consider that it can either be a supplement to your homeschooling, things of that nature. Khan Academy has been around forever. I think I was a kid when they were, at least in high school, when that started kicking off. And I mean, the whole idea of all these videos, these resources, if everyone's all in a tizzy right now around PBS and things like that, so that's essentially online. It's video.
That's absolutely right. Yes, people have been using that forever. And the other thing that people don't consider is that you can do a hybrid solution, and you sort of alluded to that a little bit, where you can, homeschool your kid, but have them take classes in their local district school. That is completely allowed. I was going to say ill and then legal, and that sounded like illegal, so I didn't want to go there. But totally legal, and the district really has to let you do it. A lot of people take advantage of that rule to do sports. So the kids play sports in the schools, but they could take chemistry, they can take algebra, they can do all that as long as they're not full time in the school. They can otherwise homeschool, which I think it's great. It lets you dip your toe in the water rather, before jumping into homeschooling. You might find that your kid does better this way. Who knows this. Every kid's different. Anybody who has two kids knows that all kids are different, right? And they all have different ways of doing things and learning. Yeah.
So let's talk a little about payment for this, for not you guys, but in general. You want to explore your options outside of just going to the local public school or something of that nature. What does that look like for a parent that's just beginning this search, or maybe they've seen all these headlines around education freedom accounts which have maxed out, which was the goal. I mean, anyone thinks that this is wasn't the goal, it's wrong. Like, they wanted to show that this was going to be a success, and there's a lot of demand. And next year, I think it goes up 25% or something like that. More students will be able to enroll. To talk about the funding side of this.
The funding side of EFAs.
Or even just in general, you want to get outside of the public school situation and
Sure.
do it.
So what happens with EFAs, and everybody's eligible, although they prioritize people who are already in the program, and this is what they did this year. So they had to get all of their applications and then say who's accepted. So anybody who's in, siblings of kids who already get it, people with special needs, and people below 350% of the federal poverty level get priority. And then, only then, will families who are above the 350%, that universal part, only then will they fill those slots. So that's how that works in general. They start with about $4,100 as a baseline. But then it's the same algorithm that they use to determine the adequacy funds for the schools. So they're really trying to parallel that action, because I mean, it's how they can justify it at the state level, right? So you get a little more if your kid has special needs, and maybe even a lot more. I think it can go up to like a total of about $8,000
Yeah,
per
something
kid.
like that.
And I forget the actual numbers. If they were performing poorly in reading in third grade, it's a specific thing, and you get more if you are. I don't remember what the level is, but if you're free and reduced lunch, that's the level. Whatever qualifies you for that will allow you to get more money as well. So it's a decent chunk of change depending on your kid. I mean, even 4,000 can help a lot. Especially for homeschooling. My understanding for homeschooling is costs about $1,000 per kid per year if you want to homeschool. So,
That's a little less than 25,000 or whatever we're sitting at for the
just a
state average.
little,
It's a little different.
just a little. Yeah. And, of course, if you have more money, you can spend more. But, I've never thought that the amount of money you spend on a school is what makes it good or not. And that's what people are arguing. It's like, oh my God, we're spending 27 grand per kid across the state on average, and that's not enough. I don't know. Abraham Lincoln learned to read and do all the things without any of that, right? How come he could and our kids can't, right? There's other problems going on. There's other things that cause this.
Yeah, you always hear the stories of the person who went into acting, or they traveled the world with their parents and did all this or that. It's like, you don't need to be a rich family to homeschool. Like ideally, polar opposite, more and more families should probably consider that as an option. You talk about difficulty with transportation, things like that, getting it, especially in your rural parts of the state where there isn't a school that you really like that's close by. I mean, that's something at least that should be considered. It may not work time-wise, things like that. You got to be able to make a living, obviously, and not all households are able to make it work. But it definitely should be something that's on the table, and for so many families, they're just written off because of old stereotypes from television in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, I totally agree. You might have that single parent household, and they're working full time. That makes it harder. But there are drop-off programs in these micro schools. So you can still look at different alternatives that take different approaches to learning and to teaching. Um, yeah, did you want to talk more about EFAs though? I mean, that's in general what families can get. I don't think I mentioned this yet, but we just started marking on our website the providers who take EFAs. There's going to be a process, but now there's a filter, so you can actually look there, and that'll make it easier for families to find stuff, that they're looking for, EFAs to use. The parallel thing. Yeah, sorry. I had something else I wanted to say, and I
No
can't
worries.
think of what it is now. Yeah.
No worries. I mean, overall, I would just say people go check out edopt.org, edopt.org. Check out the resources that are there. The staff are listed there. It's not one of these hidden where you've got some rich private equity person in California hires a bunch of random activists. It's like, no, this is an organic thing that's been developed in the state, and that's why I think it's really important. It's great that you guys are doing something like this.
That's right. And I'll say that almost everybody that works for EdUp are volunteers. A lot of them not only volunteer their time, but they, donate money to us. We hire two people, a marketing person and a tech person, because that you can't easily get for free. I need a retired person who can do that. And all of our services are free for everybody. Just check out our site. Subscribe to us. Again, it's edopt.org, O-R-G. And make a donation if you like what we do. And, anywhere from $20 to $2,000 would be very helpful to us. No amount too small. Yeah.
So, Jody, how do you go from your background with a PhD in science? I saw NASA in your LinkedIn history in the 90s on artificial intelligence. Like, how do you make this transition to what you're doing now, moving to New Hampshire and all of this? It's super interesting.
Thank you. So my PhD is in learning sciences, actually. So I've always been focused on learning. Working for NASA, I worked for them for about 7 years. We were trying to create alternative learning environments. That was the big thing, but they're so traditional that they gave us some uh, creativity, whatever, like a leash, yeah, is the better word, because then they pulled the leash back. I was on like 3 or 5 projects during that time, and it was an interesting time, but I learned a lot about assessments and digital learning environments, which is what we were working on. I mean, what I like to say, and I think it's really true, that everything I've done up until now has led me to this point. I'm helping people learn. I'm developing an environment to help people learn, whether it's to learn how to find a good environment for your kid, or for a kid to learn, whatever he's ready for, and what he's interested in. So it's just all led me here. I feel like all my background. In my last position, I was designing digital environments for learning and for assessment. And I managed a team of artists and programmers to get it all done. And that's what I'm doing now. Like I'm doing the same thing, Although now my artist is really ChatGPT, not completely, but it goes there. And I mean, with technology changing too, it makes it a lot easier to do this stuff. So yeah, I retired 2 years ago, by the way. And so, this popped up 6 months after I retired. And so I jumped on it and it was like, wow, nice retirement. So I'm working full time again, quite full
Isn't
time.
that how it always goes?
Yeah. Full
So,
time still mine, but yeah.
yeah, so you actually also spent 12 years on the Croydon School Board. I mean, how has that time informed what you're doing now?
Sure. I mean, what I was trying to do was make good change within our small school. So Croydon's a small town, population 800. We have a K-4 village school that has right now up to 30 kids and goes up and down every year. And there was a lot of frustration for me anyway. I wanted it to act more like a one-room schoolhouse. And we went through cycles of administrations and teachers there, probably 3 or 4 during that 12-year period of different, more than that for superintendents. No, that's about right for superintendents, but whatever. When I presented to our teaching principal, which is typically what we have, the idea of grouping kids by ability and not by their age, her response was, well, that sounds good in theory, but you're just like doubling my job, because my job is to cover the standards for each kid at their grade level. And it was like, no, no, that's not actually your job. The standards are there to guide you when you're ready for the next thing. But that wasn't her training. And so she just dismissed it. And this happened more than once. They paid lip service to the idea, but they never did it. They're afraid. I mean, their training isn't there for that kind of thing. They're trained to teach kids at the same age with this broad spectrum of where the kids are, especially at the elementary school level, when some of them aren't even developmentally ready for the things that they're trying to do. So so that was frustrating to me. However, I learned a lot about how school district works, and I can help people navigate that if they need to, I'm also on the board for an organization called the School District Governance Association, and I'm a founding board member. We've been around since 2016, I believe, And our goal is to help school board members discover their lawful powers, that they don't become part of the administration once they get elected. They're supposed to oversee the administration. And most people jump in and say, oh, I'm going to work with them to get this and this done. It's like, no, you're supposed to see what they're doing. You're not supposed to do the work. And I was guilty of that too. I didn't know. So, I was trying things within the system. And now I'm trying from a grassroots level because in the system was hard
It's
to
very
figure out.
hard, and you're going against the stream 100%, and it's this weird. I feel like, especially so I'm 38. I mean, especially over the last 30 years, it's tremendous the upheaval that's happened in the world of K through 12 education with this weird focus where everyone's got to go the same grade no matter what, while they also, especially for a lot of people politically, want to have more and more people come from different backgrounds from around the world and magically expect them to jump into a city school, and it's like, oh, they're going to learn English right away and be able to graduate the grade with everyone else. Like, no, they're not necessarily coming from the same place. If you can't speak the language, you're going to have real issues with understanding what's being taught to you, obviously. If you're coming from somewhere, even another part of the country where you weren't taught how to read at the levels or have the expectations of where we have our curriculum set in the K through 12 schools in our state, it's going to be difficult. So like when I grew up, we separated out between the levels of the students. We had the gifted class. Yeah, the special ed class wasn't special ed like it's got the inclination has today. It's the kids that needed some extra help to be able to read. It's the tutoring, things of that nature.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's true. When I was in school, we had tracking. It was clearly just, I mean, it was sad for the kids in the bottom grade, as they called it. It just sounds like they're the worst, and they were academically, but they weren't dumb, and that wasn't being embraced either. And probably their parents would have done a better job helping them figure out what to do rather than put them in a class where nobody was motivated to be there. Motivation's a big part of it, big part of the problem.
Yeah, in the home situation. I mean, if your parents not necessarily making sure that you're up to or following up on you, people just assume the school's just going to take care of it. It's another reason why I really like the homeschool situation so much, is it does kind of encourage the parents to be more directly involved, or even just doing something simple like selecting a charter school or an alternative school situation that, even if it is more traditional, at least you're more likely to be paying attention to what's going on through that transition and surge.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's interesting. So we had one principal in our school announce proudly to a school board, our school board, um, that 22 out of 30 of the students in the school were performing below proficient in reading. Proudly presented this. And in this discussion, she said, we really don't know how to teach kids to read. So
Ugh.
what is
Ugh.
their training, right?
Yeah.
And then last week, I saw that the Department of Ed, New Hampshire Department of Ed, they have a weekly post that they talk about all the new things going on. They're offering this program to teach elementary teachers how to teach multiplication facts to their kids. Yet again, isn't this what they're supposed to learn in their teacher training? I just don't get it. I just don't get it. I'm speechless.
It's totally a speechless situation. Like, how do we get to this point where we're relying on people that don't know how to teach the basics, and then on the opposite end, they get this stuff pounded into them from certain school districts, especially in other parts of the country, where it's like, you're going to teach it exactly this way no matter what. And I'm like, that doesn't necessarily work. I don't know. We're running out of time here on this episode. This has been a fascinating conversation. Jody Underwood, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks again.
All right, edopt.org, EdOpt. Be sure to check out what they've got going on over there. The site's been around for about a year, and they're building it out. Reach out to the people there. They're locals. You're not getting some Indian call center or something crazy like that. But please give them a ring. Consider your options out there. I already said myself, too, that we decided the public schools just didn't happen to work for our son. We decided to go with a charter school in our area. We're very fortunate to have that situation, but not everyone's near a charter school. There's other ways you can teach your kid that goes beyond what is just where you happen to live and there's a school around the corner. So edopt.org, be sure to learn more about the EFA program and various other funding mechanisms that are out there. You don't have to necessarily rely on the various traditional ways that school is funding. There's different ways of handling it, especially homeschooling and things of that nature. All right, newenglandtake.com. Please be sure to check us out over there. Got a Substack going on. I had pictures I took last week at the Suncook Valley Balloon Festival. I don't know, go check it out and figure out what I'm doing over there. And be sure to subscribe over on YouTube and every podcast platform out there. Thank you to WKXL. Next up over there will be Facing the Future, brought to you by the Conquer Coalition. And once again, thanks to Grant Grock for sharing every episode. We'll talk to you soon.